Hey guys, how you doing out there? It's Mike Finelli here. Thank you so much for being here. And today's live is going to be pretty interesting. I'm going to be talking about a topic that I always talk about, which is relationship with self and with another. So today I'm going to be talking about specifically the common things that we are doing wrong in relationship. I'm going to be talking about mindfulness and the common reasons why relationships fail. And the spoiler is it's not a lack of communication or communication breakdown, which actually is the most popular apparently. So stay tuned. Appreciate your time. If you can hear me, if you don't mind chiming in, commenting, that would be amazing. Always grateful for that. And so my name is Mike Finelli. For those of you that have just started following me, I help people navigate through the self-love journey so we can break relationship patterns and so we can start creating a very different life, as well as being able to manifest that amazing partner that we've been looking for in our life. So I always talk about the journey. So really this journey is to move away from and disconnect from our conscious and unconscious patterns that we've been on and using our entire life. There are basically strategies, conscious and unconscious, for our own survival. And so really it's a step into our divinity. It's about coming home to self, to feel empowered, to reconnect to that infinite wisdom so we can process everything that's in our life for our expansion and our self-actualization. So really the idea is, because I focus on relationships, is ultimately to break relationship patterns that we've had our entire life. So I want to thank you for being here, first of all. If you can hear me, if you can give me a heart or a thumbs up or anything that's going to be able to tell me I'm not talking to myself, that would be super awesome. So I'm so honored to be here, to be able to do this work. Apparently I can't speak my words today. I've been trying to have this live like 3 times today, but one thing to another, and I've left it till the evenings. So here's some agreements. I always start off my lives with agreements that oftentimes as we're listening to these things, listen to the things I talk about, some shit might come up that resonates. And oftentimes we feel guilty, we have shame, and we self-punish because we believe that we should have it all together. And so I don't want to have any of that stuff, no shitting all over ourselves, because we're all on this journey together and trying to learn through all of these experiences that we have. So let's get right into it. Why is it that humans have such a difficult time being in relationship? What is the most common thing that we are doing wrong? So, well, first of all, we're never taught how to be in relationship, right? It's just one of those things that is inherited. We see what a relationship with our parents was, and we mimic that. So if our parents had a very good relationship, there's a good chance that we will get into a good relationship ourselves. So because there are no courses and there is no school, somehow we're supposed to know about them. And so if we've had shitty role models, we're going to take that into our relationships. And those of you that know me well, I didn't have the best role models growing up. And so I took that into my relationships in the past. And so obviously with dysfunctionality came dysfunctionality in my own relationships, until I actually started to embark on this journey and transcended all of the patterns that I had learned consciously and unconsciously. So a lot of the questions one of the actually most popular questions I get asked is should relationships be difficult? And the short answer should be no. Especially a good portion of us that may have grown up with with dysfunctionality, like I was just saying. It should be no. But the answer is actually yes, they should be difficult. So hear me out. This maybe sound a little strange. They should not be difficult because of communication issues or money or how to raise a children and all of that stuff. But so these are some of the common ways, right? But I believe that relationships should be hard because they ask us to level up our game. You know, they ask us to show up very differently than we have in the past for anything. They ask us to be mindful. They ask us to show up for our partner. You know, a good, solid, growing relationship asks us to go inward. And that inward challenges our narratives, challenges these stories, these patterns, these things that we saw, which I refer to, and connecting to our partner at a different level. And so what it allows us, it asks us to say, are these stories that we create, are they from ego? Are they from resentment? Are they from fear? Are they from unhealthy attachment? And so it allows us, so in a growth-oriented relationship, conscious relationship, these are the challenges that come up. These are the challenges that almost force us to take responsibility. Right? So personally, I believe that if you don't see relationships as a growth opportunity, then we're actually doing it all wrong. Like what are we really in relationship for? Just to have company? To have a family? Maybe. I mean, for most of us, I believe we want to be in a relationship so that we can grow from that. And so this is the reason why, sometimes it feels so hard a lot of the time, is because, again, we're not taught about raising the level, right? We're not taught about being in relationship. We don't understand milestones. We don't understand what a win is in relationships. They'll teach us algebra, which, by the way, I've never used ever again. At least not that I'm aware of. And so personally, they've been the most difficult times for me because they've forced me and asked me to be better, especially recently in my current relationship. If I want to cultivate a conscious relationship, it challenged those beliefs. It challenges me, right? It challenges me to step it up, to do better, to challenge my beliefs, to challenge the shit that I saw growing up. And I see it as an opportunity of growth because I learned from the experiences from the past, right? So now I can be a better partner. And with every relationship, I've learned something and I've taken that into my current one. And for those that have been in long relationships, I would like to remind you that just because you're with the same person for 15 years or 20 years or 25 years or 50 years, there's always a relationship within the relationship. You go through phases. You go through shit and you grow. You go through stuff and you transcend. You learn something new about yourself. You learn something new about your partner. You learn something new about the dynamic. And so relationships that last a long time, that are happy relationships, we've learned and we've learned something about ourselves. We've taken the opportunity to grow and to get closer to our partner. And we've raised the bar, right? We've raised the bar both personally as an individual, but also as a couple. So that's just a thought there. Now, so what do we learn? What do we learn? So as we begin to do the inner work and we embark on this journey, we always expect to learn something about ourselves, about us truly showing up for ourselves and for our partner, as I was saying. It means that in order for us to thrive and to show up, we also have to be very mindful, mature. We need to be vulnerable, get into those uncomfortable areas, have a very uncomfortable conversation, cry in front of our partners. And I know that may be difficult for some of the men that are watching this, but it's all part of being an adult. Like really, that's what it is. I mean, the relationship course that we should receive is how to actually be an adult. And if it doesn't exist, I'm considering creating one. Well, actually, a lot of the work that I do is in fact about adulting. So what happens is, from this position of being able to be mindful and mature in adulting, we're able to get into a position where we can begin to adjust our habits to your partner. And so what it does is there's growth there, and the dynamic of the relationship changes, and you can start to relate a lot better. Because there's no question, in relationship, your partner is going to salt your wounds. They're going to get in there. And I learned through my experience after a couple of relationships, long-term relationships that were dysfunctional, that your partner is going to get under your skin. There is no question. They're going to touch parts of yourself that were never handled potentially. And so you're operating from old programs. You're operating from old patterns that you saw, most likely from a dysfunctionality that you saw growing up. And so I'd like to thank everyone that's joined so far. If you can give me a thumbs up or a low or a high or a heart or something or other, make sure you can hear me okay. That'd be awesome. If you can tell me where you're coming from, where you're watching from, that'd be really cool. So I'm actually talking about mindfulness right at this moment. And so what it does is this vulnerability of love will often require us to cover up and protect our hearts from further injury. So if we saw dysfunctionality and we had dysfunctional parents, we learned those patterns: yelling and screaming, name calling, stonewalling, anything of that nature. We learned because we were never taught in school on how to actually be an adult. So part of this work that I do with individuals is to teach them about how to show up, how to feel more connected to themselves, how to be more loving. And that oftentimes can be a very, very cold feeling to get into those uncomfortable areas because we want to so often protect our hearts. And speaking of cold, Uday, I appreciate the -18. So the fact that it's over there, the -18. So I appreciate that part of it. So often we'll engage in these mindful practices based on exercises and work to take advantage of the neuroplasticity of our brain. So if you don't know anything about neuroplasticity, I'm sure a lot of people do, and if you don't, you can definitely look it up. And so what happens is our brain we're able to create new neural pathways so we can actually create more habits. So if we haven't learned something, if there's something that we were not used to, we can actually relearn it. And we can actually do it within weeks, right? We can actually do it within weeks. It just takes 6 to 8 weeks for the most part to learn new mindful practices. We begin to change our neural pathways. And that changes the way that we are and the way that we think and the way that we react, most importantly. Because a lot of the idea of being triggered, the idea of that is going from being triggered, from reacting to responding to any situation. Now, specifically, I deal with relationship to self. So any situation will do the trick. And of course, this radiates into your relationship. The more you know about yourself, the more you learn new patterns and ideas, you will be less reactive and you'll be more responsive to anything. So, can you teach an old dog a new trick? Apparently you can. So the old story about you can't teach a dog a new trick is also a fallacy. So, excuse me. So the last part I want to talk about for this evening was a lot of my work with, let's say, with couples, or even if we hear about it, if we even look up what is the number one reason why couples break up, for the most part, you're going to see poor communication. And so there's truth to that to some extent. But all of the work that I've done over the years is I've realized that, and there's also research on this, is that we actually have distinct sub-personalities, both operating consciously and unconsciously. If you can hear me okay, it'd be great. If any of this resonates, if any of this makes sense, please feel free to make a comment. That would be really awesome. So these sub-personalities. So if you think about this, you don't behave the same way you do if you're going into a staff meeting, if you're going to a cocktail party, or if you're having a conversation with a loved one. You have very different type of sub-personalities. So if you're having trouble relating, or you've had trouble relating, or if you've had trouble communicating, you're probably in touch with that part of yourself that is in control of protecting or keeping you safe. It's almost that part of yourself that is not capable of intimacy. And it's very difficult for people to hear this. When I went through my journey several years ago, as I learned through my relationships, is that a big part of me was protecting myself and wanting to keep safe. And so I was actually having trouble being able to connect to that part of me, to connect to and be intimate with any of my partners, and being anything but angry, frustrated, lashing out, basically having a temper tantrum most of the time when in conflict. So this is the part about poor communication and having a sub-personality. Did I do that at my office? No, I was in corporate for 17 years. I didn't yell at anybody. Not that I remember anyway. I didn't swear at anybody. I didn't call them names. I didn't do all of these dysfunctional things in the office. Maybe a little bit passive-aggressive for those of you that have worked with me in the past. But this is the part of us that once we get into intimate relationships, we try to protect ourselves. And so it's not so much lack of or poor communication, it's which part of your psyche is actually showing up to the conversation, which part of your psyche is actually showing up to the relationship. And so that's the question. If you've been in a relationship, you are in a relationship, and when you are in conflict, what parts of you show up and when? Could be even in an office environment, right? Which part of you actually shows up? And so what happens is the moment we become more mindful and we ask ourselves these powerful questions, we can learn things about ourselves. We can create new skills. We can create more self-awareness. We can practice more breathing, more compassion, more kindness to ourselves and to our partner. And I'm just going to answer a question here before I can do. But what is the problem with protecting oneself? One can't fully be vulnerable, right? Yes and no. The idea of this journey is to not necessarily protect ourselves, is to show up fully in a mature, responsible way. These unconscious patterns that we have of protecting ourselves come from the fear of being hurt. And there's a distinct difference between being open, honest, and vulnerable and protecting ourselves. Vulnerability is not necessarily, in my opinion, is not necessarily talking about your stuff and opening up. Anyone that is conscious or anyone that is in a relationship in my opinion, should not feel like they need to be protective. The moment that we truly connect to ourselves and truly connect to our partner is where we can be completely open and free and be completely vulnerable without the need of protection. Once we heal and we go through this journey and we realize the reasons why we're protecting, a self-protection mechanism that we learned when we were 5, when we were 7, when we were 3, when we weren't being seen or heard, or we didn't get things our way. Once we understand those patterns from an adult point of view, then we're able to say, oh shit, I don't need to protect myself at all, actually. I don't need to go through that protection mechanism because I am whole the way that I am, and not everyone is out there to get me. Not everyone's out there to harm me. We don't have that fear as we do as potentially as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old. From a very emotional point of view, right? And so I appreciate the question. I'm not sure if I've answered it, but that's kind of my opinion on it. And so I believe that the therapy industry, so psychotherapists and psychologists, and I have total respect for that. I've used those services in the past. I know some very good psychotherapists. I feel like they're putting the cart before the horse when it comes to dealing with communication. People can't simply communicate effectively if they're coming from a wounded place or if you're in protection mode. You just can't. There's no way you can be open and honest and vulnerable if you have a wound in the background operating at a subconscious level. And so in my experience with psychotherapy is that we try to do it the other way around. First, I feel we need to be able to handle those wounds, understand their wounds, understand what our protection mechanisms are. I mean, I know what mine are. And I realize that if I am beginning in my relationship with my partner, is that if we get into an uncomfortable conversation, I can sense and understand the wound of not being seen. As simple as, I don't know, here's a great example. I say we agree that she's going to do the dishes and she doesn't, and then I get upset, which doesn't make sense. She doesn't for whatever reason, or she was planning to. Something very simple like that. This is all domesticated stuff. We've at some point probably lived with somebody that gets under our skin. But the wound there is not the situation. It's the shit that's happening in the back end. The wounded part of us, the wounded part of me. It's my example, so I'll say me, where I was not seen or I was not heard enough from a primary caregiver at a much younger age. And so we carry that into adulthood. And so now we react to that trigger. The situation triggers that reaction. Without understanding effectively the wounds, there's two ways that communication can go. Hey babe, or hi honey, or whatever the term of endearment is for the day. I really hate it when you when you say you're going to do the dishes. Now I have to do it, and we can have an unconscious reaction. The other is, hey babe, I remember having a conversation about you were doing the dishes. I felt a part of me, not because it's only a part of you. It's not I feel a part of me feeling rejected or unheard, because I thought you were going to do that. And that part of me I know is from something from childhood, and I want to respect that. but it would be great if you are going to do something to do it such that we can continue to have a peaceful relationship. This happens. This is how my partner and I communicate 90% of the time, which is probably higher than most. So I believe that the interaction between couples begin knowing what part of you is present and is open to understanding yourself. If the wrong parts of you are present, the attempt to create intimacy is almost impossible. Because if you have that same interaction the first way, it's going to lead to resentment, it's going to lead to disconnection, it's going to lead to a relationship breakdown. I know. Been there, done that. And so, question. But could it be the narrative you would apply to the situation to come to a conclusion or the dishes not being done? Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the narratives. And that's part of the work, right? Is the narrative. Okay, so the wound will always go back to that narrative. If that story is there and that wound is there, if the wound is present, I'm not sure if I understand your question, but if the wound is present, you will create any story around that not being listened to. So the idea is to be able to be mindful. So this is what I talked about earlier in the video, is be mindful of those triggers and have that awareness, that presence of understanding where that wound is coming from. And so what happens over time is that it becomes instantaneous, where it doesn't get done. You start to feel that, because you start to feel that in your body as you get deeper into this work, as you get into this journey. You begin to feel that in your body. And the moment that you feel that, you're able to have this alert presence and say, oh, before you even say a word, which is without even reacting, you're able to handle the situation very differently than you would have before, right? And so that's the part about these different personalities that we have, these sub-personalities, where we're behaving at a very subconscious level. So if you want to be good in relationships, in my opinion, it's so important to be able to start doing the work ideally before relationship. If you're in a relationship or it's early, or you've been together and you've realized that there are some of these situations coming up, then this is an opportunity to be able to understand where those wounds are from. And, you start doing, like, they call it pop culture stuff like inner child work and psychotherapy. But a lot of journaling sentence stems, a lot of the work that I do with my clients are about getting back in touch with the timeline of their life. So there's events where have transpired in your early life that are able to really understand and dictate where you learned that pattern from. And then you're able to have that knowledge. So a lot of the journey where it starts is with self-awareness. So a lot of the work that I do is gaining that awareness, right? And so individuals, in my opinion, if the dynamic and the paradigm and that begins to change, hopefully generationally that will begin to change, maybe they will have a relationship course in school as a minimum requirement. And if you're Canadian and you've been to school in Canada, like French is a requirement, relationship and self-love should be a course. And if it's not, then yeah, we'll create a school for that. And it's my opinion that for a relationship to be very successful, that people start working on themselves early, even before relationship, or if you have a partner that is unwilling to do the work as well. And this is how couples tend to stay happier together, is when we can take the level of the relationship to the next level. Because they ask so much of us. They ask us to up level our game every day. Sometimes there's tolerance, sometimes there's understanding, there's forgiveness, all of that stuff. And so it's very difficult to be able to do that if we keep, if the relationship keeps salting our wounds, if that scar tissue doesn't get worked on, right? Relieving some of that scar tissue that we've had from our experiences from childhood, but also from other relationships. I think I don't mention this enough. You learn some of this stuff also from previous relationships where people have abandoned us. They've not given us the time of day. They weren't there for us. They didn't support us. They didn't cheat us. They left us. All of those things, right? And so the idea is to be able to work on these patterns, work on these things and problems, because they're not going to work themselves out. That's the reality. They're not going to work themselves out. And so that's all I had for today. Mindfulness and communication, the work. This is part of the adulting, right? This is how we carry this work into a relationship. This is not always manifesting a new person in our life. The journey, I always say that the idea is to break old patterns and manifest a relationship, conscious relationship in our life. Doesn't mean it's with a new person. You can be in a relationship with a person and you're maybe 10 years in, or you're 12 years in, and you're 15 years in. And, maybe some of the intimacy starts to go away. Some of the things from the past are coming up. You wish you could be closer. You wish you could talk about certain things that you're uncomfortable with, and you don't have that level of intimacy yet, and you want to go deeper and have a conscious conversation and take that to the next level. Because the beauty about relationship, the beauty about the human condition is that our level of intimacy, we can make our floor the new ceiling. We can always up level our game. It's not just about IQ and intelligence and having the highest score with other things outside of relationship. We can always take the relationship to the next level, build more trust, build more love, build more connection. And that's what we want. We all want more love and more connection. And it's such a beautiful time in history to be able to do that. We have the technology, we have the information, we have a shit ton of information out there. We just need to be able to absorb that so we can gain more wisdom. And that's what we need these days. We need more wisdom. We need to raise the bar on everything in our life, including how we show up in every situation, which part of the subpersonality shows up mindfully, skillfully, so we can have more compassion, more kindness for the people around us. And maybe we'd have less wars, maybe we'd have less fighting, maybe we'd have less all of that stuff. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your questions. Always a pleasure. I'm going to have this recorded so you can watch it another time. If you have friends, if you have family that are interested in this kind of topic, it would be awesome to let them know. Let them know that this is the kind of conversations I like to have. And as always, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.